Hello, welcome to a little bonus episode of The Evolution of Horror. My name is Mike Muncer. As ever, I am your host. Now, this week sees the home entertainment release of one of the most talked about and biggest horror films of the year, Longlegs. It's finally coming to Blu-ray and VOD on the 21st of October. And to celebrate this, I got the chance to sit down and chat to one of the stars of the film, the brilliant Alicia Witt. Alicia Witt has quietly been starring in some of the best and coolest film and TV projects over the last 30 years or so. I remember I first discovered her as a young horror fan watching 90s teen horror because I was obsessed with Urban Legend. Of course, she plays Natalie, the final girl in Urban Legend, so I've been kind of familiar with her since I was a kid. As I grew up and I got into Twin Peaks, I also discovered, of course, that she made a brief appearance in Twin Peaks and then came back in Twin Peaks The Return, and she gave such an incredible, powerful performance in Longlegs. She was almost unrecognisable in that film. And I was very excited to get to chat to her for a little bit. She was in the UK, because she is also a singer, songwriter. She was in the UK performing a concert here, and I had a little Zoom chat with her the morning after. So what you're about to hear is my conversation with Alicia Witt. We talk a little bit about her career to date. We talk about her role in Longlegs. We keep the Longlegs chat fairly spoiler-free. And of course, I had to ask her a little bit about her time on Twin Peaks and working with my hero, David Lynch. I will say, actually, spoiler alert for Twin Peaks in this interview. If you have not seen Twin Peaks, or if you haven't yet reached season 2 of Twin Peaks, we do talk about who killed Laura Palmer and whether or not Alicia knew that when she was filming her scenes. So that is revealed in this conversation. So I will just say a quick spoiler alert for that. And we talk about a couple of very, very minor details about The Return, but nothing that will spoil that for you. So please enjoy my conversation with the brilliant Alicia Witt. Hello, Alicia Witt. It's so lovely to meet you.
Hey, Mike. It's lovely to meet you, too.
You're in London right now, right? How did the concert last night go?
It was splendid. It was just, I'm still all buzzy from it. I can't get over looking out into an audience and seeing all of those faces, just receiving these songs I've made up and listening. It was so quiet. So completely quiet, with the exception of when I asked the audience to sing along, and then they did.
Oh, that's perfect, right? That's absolutely perfect. How do you find it, the experience of being Alicia, the singer-songwriter, as opposed to being Alicia, the actor, you know?
I find that I constantly forget that I'm Alicia, the actor. I don't think about that. But then, of course, I do these meet and greets, which is a very limited ticket ahead of the concert, and it allows me the chance to meet some of the audience and sign things for them and take photos. And then, of course, I'm reminded, and like at last night's meet and greet, the array of different projects and posters and DVDs that I was asked to sign, that's always stunning. I have to remember, I've been a part of so many different things over the years. But I guess I have such a grounded life living in Nashville as I do. I'm not surrounded by the acting industry anymore. I lived in LA for 25 years. And now that I live in Nashville, I'm surrounded by music primarily. And the people that I spend the most time with are either musicians or they're not in the entertainment industry at all. So I think more about music. And certainly this year, with the Christmas album coming out imminently, and I'm producing that. And I also, at least as of now, I self-manage my music career. So there's so many moving parts to keep track of. And music is just so much more at the forefront of my consciousness. My acting, I do have a team in place. So when a job comes along, they send it my way and I read it and go off and film it. But it's it's not in my brain on a day-to-day basis the same way that music is.
Wow, that's really interesting. But you're still going to continue acting, I take it.
Oh, absolutely. I'm happy when I have that 50-50 balance. But I find that I need it. I really crave having it be equal. So getting to immerse into a role fully and then to come out of it and focus on some music, or I'm constantly writing new songs, even if they're songs that don't end up getting recorded. In my downtime from working on a movie, if I'm on location somewhere, I'm constantly writing new songs. And I always play a show if I can, if I'm working in a new city for a while. So they're both constantly getting merged together. But it's a really healthy balance for me, I think. And also, I don't have the kind of acting career, or at least I haven't had the sort of career where I walk down the street and people chase me, or there's photographers at every turn. I'm able to play these characters, and I'm very grateful that I'm in a position where I'm offered these extraordinary roles. But I'm also able to be somewhat anonymous when I go out. And certainly with a role like Ruth in Longlegs, she looks nothing like me. Also, I've had quite a few people tell me they didn't even realize it was me. I can count on both my hands the times that people have actually mentioned Longlegs to me out in public. It's still more often other roles when I go out.
I love that. Well, tell me a little bit about Longlegs. It was such a fantastic performance, and like you said, you are almost unrecognizable in it. It's a really kind of transformative performance. But tell me a little bit about kind of how you came to that project and what you first made of the character of Ruth when you read her on the page.
I came to it just the ordinary way. I received a script from my agent, but I could tell from my agent's call, when she called to tell me she was sending this to me, I could tell she was excited about it. And I could sense that she thought I had a good chance of possibly being asked to play Ruth. So I read it with that excitement in my head. And then with every scene, I longed to play her more and more. I had this visceral sense that Ruth was someone that I understood in a way I couldn't even put words to. But her complicatedness and her heartbreak and her pain and all of what led her to have the strength to make these unthinkable choices she made so that her daughter would be allowed to live. I understood that, and I longed to play her. I felt like something in me would be released if I were allowed to play her, and trusted with that character. So I genuinely prayed after I read the script that somehow it would all align. And then having had the hour-long Zoom that I did with Oz, we talked about her, we talked about our own lives. And I think he understood that I saw something so much deeper in the character he had written than what was obvious on the page. And fortunately, we were aligned in that. I think what I felt from Ruth and what he felt from Ruth were very similar. So just a beautiful gift. And we had about 6 weeks before we started filming by the time I was cast. So it gave us the chance to continue to develop Ruth and talk about all the different backstory that I had in my head and make sure we were all on the same page every step of the way. So by the time I started filming, we didn't actually talk all that much on the set. It was more a sort of shorthand. And he gave me so much encouragement. And I felt like Ruth was in very safe hands.
I love that. Tell me, it must have been like, how was that process of kind of putting yourself in Ruth's mindset? Because, like you say, she does some pretty terrible things, but she's doing it for a reason in her head, right? And how important was it to you to be able to kind of, I guess, sympathize with Ruth as a character in order to portray her?
I sympathized with her right from the get-go, from the first reading of the script. And I just loved her more and more the more I played her. And I did a lot of journaling and I made playlists, most of which were from the point of view of younger Ruth and her love for Lee. I felt like there was a lot of transference where I imagined Ruth didn't have very happy romantic relationships. And I thought there was trauma in her past long before Longlegs showed up. And I think there was an almost obsessive love for Lee as the one good thing in her life that she could hold on to. So the good thing about that is that it allowed her to make those horrible choices to save Lee's life. But it's at its core, I think the movie and the Ruth and Lee relationship is really about that complicated love between any mother and daughter, no matter what your dynamic might be. But all women have a relationship, whatever it is, with a mother. They're all daughters. And I sensed that that was the story that I was inhabiting. Mm-hmm. So it made it easy to sympathize with Ruth. And in most of the scenes that you see on screen, I felt as though I was having an out-of-body experience, that the work I'd done before I got to set allowed me to just vanish and become this other thing and let it flow out through me. I don't really feel as though I played Ruth as much as I feel like I channeled her.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about kind of being on set with Nick Cage as well. How much kind of interaction was there with him? Because I've heard stories that he kind of kept himself to himself when he wasn't kind of filming with people, right? Tell me a little bit about kind of your interactions with him.
We were prepared before he arrived to know that he wasn't planning to have small talk or be sociable because he was going to be fully immersed in the character. But there are different versions of that. And he was so friendly and so normal within this extremely heightened character he was playing. It wasn't like he spoke in that voice the whole time or didn't make eye contact or was, he was very reasonable. And the scene where he was tying me up and we were down on the ground, he was really careful to keep checking in with me and making sure I wasn't in pain. And certainly was able to say hello and, answer people if they asked if he wanted water and that sort of thing. But he also gave as much when the camera was turned on the other actors as he did when the cameras were on him. And especially when you see how intense his portrayal was, that says a lot. That voice couldn't have been easy to keep doing the whole time, but he did.
Wow.
He was absolutely wonderful and so patient. And we had really cold weather that showed up in that first scene where it was snowing. And he just stood out there with all of us without a jacket and waited for the Polaroid to not malfunction because it kept on We had a bit of a kerfluffle with that Polaroid camera. He was just so sweet. Never wanted to leave and run back to his trailer or anything like that.
I love
He's
that.
lovely.
Does it
I
ever?
hope I get a chance to work with him on another movie where we can interact a bit more in a different type of character too.
Yeah,
We talked
absolutely.
quite a bit at the premiere, so that was really nice. He's a
He
sweetheart.
and he always has such a distinctive, specific style. And like you said, that performance is a very intense performance. It's quite a big performance. Did you find? Did that kind of affect the way that you wanted to tackle playing Ruth, or the way that Micah wanted to tackle playing Lee? That you've got this big performance, I guess, from Nick Cage, potentially offset against something a little bit more subtle in your characters.
No, and that's amazing because, as you may or may not know, I haven't seen the movie myself, and I don't plan to see it for personal reasons, just because I think what came out of me is what I don't necessarily want to see. I do want to see the rest of it, but I have seen clips, kind of unavoidably clips of Nick's performance and Micah's, and I think it's fascinating that there are certain inflections. A lot of the scenes, like that first scene with Micah and me in Ruth's house, that was one of the first scenes we filmed. So neither of us had met Nick yet. And I didn't know how Nick was going to deliver his lines or what sort of voice he would have. That wasn't anything that was talked about. Also, that hand gesture that Ruth makes, I had this idea from working on the script ahead of filming that when she talks about the beast rising up out of the sea and the 10 horns on the heads of the beast, I thought, well, I have 10 fingers, so each of my fingers will be a horn. And I don't know, because I haven't seen the movie, how much might be visible, but there were a few moments I did a thing with a hand or another hand, and it's subtle, I imagine, but I thought it's her constant reminder that she has the 10 horns with her at all times. So that was something I talked to Oz about, and he loved that idea. So he knew I was doing that. And that's what this means when I put the hands up to the sky. And I didn't know that was going to become the poster, of course, or one of the posters. Yeah. But so weird then to see Nick doing this thing.
Yeah.
I didn't know he was going to do that. And I doubt he had watched my work. I certainly, even if he had, he wouldn't have known, because I didn't speak to him. He didn't know I had 10 horns. But it's like it's just so weird. And then inflections, certain words that I knew were parallels, because, of course, having read the script, I knew that Ruth had some lines that were echoes of things Longlegs had said. But the inflection was eerily similar too. And then even Kiernan Shipka has similar inflections, and I don't think she saw my work or Nick's work, as far as I know. She just came in for one day.
Wow.
So it's like all of us were on the same wavelength, and something very mystical and actually sacred was happening as we were making this movie.
I love it. I'm fascinated about the fact that you haven't yet seen the film as well. I know that you've talked about this in interviews about how you found it a bit difficult to watch it back. But how have you found the general reaction to be, right? Because the marketing was so amazing. There was such a buzz. It was being branded, the scariest movie to have been made in years. Like, did you have any idea of that? Were you kind of, did you feel when you were making it like this could be something special? For me personally, I didn't think of that. I think having worked for as long as I've been fortunate enough to work, you just learn that you never know with that stuff. You can read a script and think it's going to be a huge hit, and it doesn't become that. Or you read something that might not even be very good,
and it ends up becoming a huge thing, or maybe it cuts together in a way that you weren't expecting and it elevates the script. But I think all of us knew the script was very special. I think all of us knew that Oz was next level, just as masterful of a filmmaker as any of the well-regarded directors that are out there. He's just as good as it gets. And his previous 3 movies, I think, show that. But we learned, 10 days before the end of the shoot, Neon had decided to buy the film. They saw 2 scenes and they bought it. So I think at that moment, we all knew something was happening.
Yeah.
Maybe a lot of people might see this because Neon's reputation is profound, and they've done such incredible work with their previous releases. But nothing could have prepared us for the campaign they rolled out. And I don't think any of us have ever been a part of something like this, because I don't know that anything like this has ever been done. It was mind-blowing to me, and such a thrill to be a part of something like that. I guess the only phenomenon I could compare it to even a little bit was when I got to be a part of The Walking Dead, but that was already a thing. So I knew what I was stepping into. It was a well-oiled machine at that point, but no, I had no idea Longlegs was going to resonate the way it did. And also to have the critics feel the way they did about it, and then the audience reciprocated that, and the audience came out in the record numbers they did. Usually it's one or the other, I would dare say, but just I don't know. I guess what I think is that the special feeling we all had on the set must have come through on screen in this case, because to hear people say they went to see it in the theater 5 or 6 times, it wasn't just once. Like,
it's incredible, isn't it? Yeah.
I'm so grateful.
You've mentioned, Walking Dead, and you said earlier you've been a part of so many incredible projects that mean so much to different people, right? And I would love to just ask you briefly about something that's I have loved my whole life, which is Twin Peaks. And you have kind of been involved in both iterations of Twin Peaks. And I'm currently rewatching it for the podcast, and my co-host is watching it for the very first time. And actually, we just watched the beginning of season 2, where you play Donna's little sister, Gersten Hayward. And I just wondered, what are your kind of memories of that, that brief stint that you had on that original Twin Peaks, working with David Lynch and just kind of creating that?
I remember it very well. I mean, I'd worked with him. He was the first director I ever worked with in Dune. Yeah. And so even though Twin Peaks, I knew was a show that had really resonated with people and was already very successful, when I came on board to do that first episode of season 2, I had more of an awareness, certainly, that people thought of David Lynch in very high regard when I worked on Twin Peaks than I did on Dune. Because on Dune, I just was like, oh, this is what it's like to make a movie. I didn't realize it was one of the biggest budget films of all time at that moment, and certainly didn't know any of David Lynch's work. I just thought of him almost like an uncle. He feels like a family member, because he changed my whole life. But yeah, Twin Peaks, I guess what sticks out to me the most is just the combination of feeling like, because I'd watched the whole season 1, so I had that eerie sensation like I'd been shrunk into the television set, because there were all the characters that were so familiar to me already. And then there was David, who is just familiar on a family sort of level. And I didn't realize quite how much of my piano playing he was going to use either in the episode. When I played the Pine Top Boogie Woogie, I was just playing that in between setups. I didn't even realize the cameras were rolling, to be honest with you. So when my family and I watched that season premiere from Massachusetts a few months later, we were as surprised as anybody to see me playing piano over the closing credits.
Yeah.
And in the script, I don't think there was quite as much piano playing either. Like the Rondo Capriccioso by Mendelssohn that I played, I think that was added in because I was noodling around at the piano, as I always do if there's a piano within my reach. It was just so much fun.
I love that. And of course, you know, for us Twin Peaks fans, that's quite an important scene because you're playing the piano there accompanying Leland Palmer, Laura Palmer's dad, of course, played by the amazing Ray Wise. Ray Wise is kind of dancing and singing next to you while you're playing, and he has this kind of meltdown. Of course, we didn't know this at the time, but he turns out to be the murderer, right? I just wondered, like, from memory, did you know anything at that point? Did you know that he was the killer?
That's a really good question. And I think that we did know.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, my recollection, and I might be wrong, but I seem to recall uncharacteristically for David, because on on season 3 of Twin Peaks, he didn't tell me a thing. I had no idea what was going on beyond the fact that I was Gersten again. But I did not know. I don't know who Stephen was. To me, I assume we were having an affair, but David wouldn't tell us. So all we did was work with the material we were given. And Caleb didn't know if we were having an affair, and he had a larger role than I did. So David told neither of us anything beyond what was on the page. But I think I did know that his hair had turned white because he remembered that he was the killer.
Right.
And I think that had been told to us.
Well, I'd love to just finish by bringing it back to Longlegs and linking it actually to Twin Peaks in a way, because I spoke to Oz Perkins about Longlegs a few months ago when the film was released, and he actually cited David Lynch, of course, as one of his big inspirations. You know, David Lynch, what a hero. He's such a hero and an inspiration to so many people, it feels like, in the industry. I'd love to just hear a bit about your experiences of working with him, your memories. You know, he's obviously, the news has just come out recently that he's unwell, that he may not be directing again. But again, like, he seems like he was such an important part of so many people's careers at this point.
You know, it's my work in Twin Peaks that had shown Oz that I could be Ruth.
Oh,
he
wow.
did share that with me at our first Zoom meeting after I'd read the script. So it's another way in which David has forever changed my life. I think David's doing quite well. I have seen him within the past year, and I think he's quite well, but I think, as he said in his statement, he's not retiring anytime soon. So whatever form that should take, he's just extraordinary. He's one of the most significant figures in my whole life, and so very dear to me. And knowing that his work was so influential on Oz meant a lot to me stepping into Longlegs, but it was also very apparent, even though Oz hasn't shared a set with him, their directing style is very similar in the sense that you have the absolute knowing that this is their movie, their vision. And as an actor, you trust fully and completely. You just surrender yourself to whatever it is they ask of you. There's such a mutual respect. And a respect also for the crew and from the crew. And I think Oz's vision is equally as apparent in his 3 previous movies. He's just one of the finest directors I've ever worked with, and he's in that category with David and Cameron Crowe and all of them, John Waters.
Yes. Oh my God.
He's exceptional. Yeah, I would be very curious to know if David sees the same, if he sees Longlegs, if he might resonate, because it's as though both of them create this world that is inspired by or influenced by this one in which we all live, this testing ground in which all us humans are living. But also it's very uniquely their own. And when you play a role in their movie, you become a part of that world and you just disappear into it. Mm-hmm. And then you come out like it's a bit of an out-of-body experience working with both of them. Fantastic. That's what's been consistent for me about the 4 times I've worked with David.
I love that. Well, Alicia Witt, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And there we go. That's it for my interview with Alicia Witt. She was so wonderful, and things almost got a bit emotional towards the end there, talking about David Lynch. So it was really lovely to get the chance to chat to her a little bit about her career. I wish I'd had a bit more time. I would love to have asked her some questions about urban legend as well, but alas, we had to wrap things up at the end there. But thank you all so much for listening. If you haven't seen Longlegs, go and check it out. It's out on home entertainment this week, 21st of October. If you scan back through our main feed, you'll find a deep dive discussion and review of Longlegs as well. Please do check out the film. Let us know your thoughts. In the meantime, we'll be back Friday for another regular episode of The Evolution of Horror.